Thank you for joining us today. My name is Ryan Gregoire. I'm your association's legislative director. I'm joined by Pat Cummings, NYSAC Counsel, and Dave Lucas, NYSAC's Director of Finance and Intergovernmental Affairs. We're together today to talk about the governor's recent state fiscal year 2023 executive budget impact report. And we're bringing to you the county perspective of her budget. We're talking about items, both positive and negative, that impact counties and what we should be advocating for and looking for as this budget moves through the process to a final enacted budget sometime in early April. To set the stage for our listeners today, the governor's budget has a lot of policy and budget implications that are beneficial to counties. There are a couple areas of concern that we have, and we're going to be working with her team, and the state legislature, both Senate Majority Leader Stuart Cousins' team and Speaker Carl Heastie's team, to address some of the concerns that we have, and also to advocate for the inclusion of a lot of these good things in the final enacted budget. So to kick it off, I want to focus on some of the high-level top county priorities that we had on our agenda going into the budget advocacy. And the first one being a couple county sales tax diversions. And you've probably heard NYSAC talk about this ad nauseum. There's two county sales tax diversions right now on the books that impact your ability to direct locally driven resources for your programs that you want to implement. There's a diversion for the Aid to Municipalities program. That's $59.1 million. That's a negative impact on the counties. And there's another diversion of county sales tax to help pay for a distressed hospital facilities pool, which was set up in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic for hospitals that are experiencing financial stress because of that. And that's a $250 million diversion from New York City and the counties outside of New York City. So with that, Dave, maybe you can start us off here. What did the governor do with these two diversion issues?
Yeah, it's it's a little bit of good, it's a little bit of bad, but the bad was not unexpected. On the first one that Ryan talked about, the AIM program, the $59 million, the governor actually is going to restore the state funding for that. So that diversion will end beginning, I believe, in October of 2022. There's probably one more diversion in May that'll be taken out, I think, to address towns. But then after that, the state will pick up that responsibility. So that's a $59 million savings for counties where those local resources could be used for local programs. The other program, the Distressed Hospital Fund, was supposed to expire at the end of this state fiscal year. But we got a foreshadowing, and we knew from the beginning that just because something sunsets in the financial plan, it's always a point of negotiation when the sunset date comes up. And in the 6-month update to the financial plan, in September of last year, they indicated they wanted to make this diversion permanent for the Distressed Health Facilities Fund.
Right.
So to date, they've taken out $500 million, but there's been no money dispersed to health facilities yet. So going forward, they plan on making a $350 million pool with $250 coming from New York City and the counties, $200 from the city, $50 from the other 57 counties, and another $100 million from the state. So that's what their plan is. That's what the proposal is from the governor's office. Clearly, that is a negative. We thought it was going to end. We knew maybe it wouldn't. Now it's on paper that the governor wants to fight for this. And the legislature sided with us last year in budget negotiations. They said this is a state responsibility. We should be doing this. We will have to work with the legislature to correct this going forward.
Yeah,
let me just add too. I think it's important for our members to know that NYSAC is supportive of these programs. We understand why the funding needs to go to the hospitals, clearly, with what happened with COVID, what highlights that. We understand the fiscal support that needs to go to our towns and cities through AIM. It's the fact that it's coming through, being paid for through county sales tax is what we're objecting to and what we want to see changed and what we did see changed with the AIM program. And why does that matter? It matters because if we can keep our county local dollars local, you have much more flexibility on what you can do. You can make sure that your services are done properly. You can lower your county sales tax if that's what your residents need. You can actually have flexibility in programs like supporting veteran programs and Meals on Wheels, things like that. So that's really what we're talking about. We're not talking about making sure that AIM funding's not even at those levels or even higher, but we're looking for that to come from the state, not from your county tax dollars.
Yeah, and just to reiterate for our members who are listening to this, we're going to have more material, and we're going to be asking you to help us advocate to the state to fix this distressed hospital county sales tax diversion. But, just to reiterate what both Pat and Dave have said here, it's these are programs that used to be paid for by the state of New York. The last couple of years, under the prior administration, they diverted your sales tax money to pay for these programs. We're simply saying to the state, take it back on your program so we can respond with whatever need is necessary at the local level. Maybe you need to make investments in your parks, right? Maybe you're attracting a lot of visitors to your community now, and they're coming to a specific asset that you have that you own. Maybe you want to make investments there. To Pat's point, maybe you want to make investments in Meals on Wheels because you're seeing a wait list growing. Maybe there's a wait list in your child care in your community, and maybe you need to be providing more daycare. Whatever the issue may be, your county sales tax dollars that you have raised should be kept at the local level for what you need to do. And that's a message that we're going to be taking to the state of New York. Allow the counties to keep our revenue locally so we can respond to what we need to be doing. So those are those top two issues, I would say. There are a lot of other great things in this budget. As far as top county priorities, we had asked for an increase in Article 6 public health aid for the county governments, particularly because our county public health workforce has been on the lines fighting COVID-19. And what does that mean? It means our county officials are injecting and inoculating individuals with the COVID-19 vaccine. We're providing and sending out testing kits into the community and to our school districts. We're educating the public on the importance of wearing a mask, socially distancing, staying safe in the community. All of this takes resources. It takes personnel. It takes money to purchase equipment. It takes coordination, both from the local level and with the state of New York, but we need resources to be able to respond to this crisis. And I think one thing we've learned from this is that over the last several years, decade or more, we have underfunded public health. And we went to the state of New York, we went to Governor Hochul and said, help us reinvigorate our public health workforce. Help us bolster that county department so we are prepared and ready to respond to the next crisis. And she delivered on that promise. She increased Article 6 aid. Dave, I think it was by about $26 million in this fiscal year, and she is making a commitment in her financial plan to continue that investment in out years. Is that correct?
Yep, it'll grow. It'll pretty much double in the next full calendar year.
So this was a huge win for counties. We are very supportive of the inclusion of this funding in the executive budget. We're going to be going to the legislature to say, make sure that this stays in, continue this investment, show the county public health workers that you understand the importance of their job. There was another item in here, Dave, that we have been asking for years, and it relates to the permanency of our existing sales tax rates. So right now, historically, counties have to come back to the legislature and beg for reauthorization of your local county sales tax rates, whatever it may be. Some counties are at 4%, some are a little higher depending on if they have to pay for specific one-off kind of programming. Think of transit, and for example, down to the MTA zone. There's a proposal that the governor has included that would allow counties to go up to 4% or lock in their existing rate permanently. So if you're a county below 4%, this authorization would allow you at local option, you would have to pass and go through the typical process, and Pat can talk about that a little bit, what that looks like at the local level. But it would allow you to go up to 4% and without needing to go and ask the state for approval. And it locks your existing rate into permanency. This is really important, Dave, for counties, specifically when you start thinking about trying to budget for the following year. It's nice to have a little bit of certainty as to what resources you're going to be receiving. So do you have anything else you want to add on that, Dave?
Yeah, I think a little bit is these are usually approved at the state legislature, but it's always done in the last week of session. It's very hectic.
Yep.
And it's held over some counties' heads that, if you don't do certain things, we might not be able to approve this. So it does cause some uncertainty in the budgeting process. But I think even the governor's budget director acknowledged that, these usually do go through. It takes up a lot of floor time. It's a lot of duplication of effort. We have to pass local resolutions and things and home rule messages to go back and forth. It's just a lot of paperwork for something that usually gets done anyhow.
Right.
And on the uncertainty side, from a credit rating agency perspective, knowing that that's locked in is gonna be helpful for counties when they go through that process as well. So it's something that's long overdue. It's been proposed by the prior governor, this governor. We've had some issues in the legislature. The Senate's been supportive. The Assembly has been less supportive.
Yeah.
And that's where we're going to need to work on it going forward with the legislature. It's a good proposal.
Yeah, just real quick too, just for especially our newer members, just some more basics on why this is important. And to tag on what Ryan was saying in the background, what you're talking about under the current law, every county gets 3 cents on a dollar automatically for sales tax. And sales tax is one of your biggest revenue, if not your biggest revenue drivers for each county. Now, if you want to, most counties, if you want to go over that 3 cents to, let's say, 4 cents every 2 years, you need to come back to the legislature and ask for that, and for that to continue to be extended. We usually call that a home rule request. So you're going to need to first pass at your local level that you're asking for this, and then that gets brought up to the legislature, and it usually is a matter of course. Once it happens, that sales tax does get continued, but it's again not a certainty, and so this is going to just make that 3 cent guarantee be a 4 cent guarantee. That does not mean that for those counties there are some that are over 4 cents, you'd still have to come back to the legislature and ask for 4.5%, let's say, every 2 years. But this is an important thing that we lock that in.
Yeah, this is not a new tax. You're locking in your existing rate or allowing a county to go to 4%. That's really what this is all about. I want to shift gears a little bit, Dave. There's been a lot of engagement from NYSAC over the years, decades, on the Medicaid program. And it was nice to see that the governor included in her budget continuing the cap on Medicaid growth for counties. So can you tell our listeners a little bit about what the Medicaid cap is for counties and how important this is to make sure that this continues every year?
Yes, I mean, prior to these caps going into existence, the first cap was implemented in the early 2000s under Governor Pataki, and prior to that, counties paid a percentage of the total Medicaid cost of the program. Regardless of how big the cost grew, we paid X percent of that program. So what they did back in the early 2000s is they capped it and said, okay, going forward, your Medicaid budget can't increase by more than 3% a year. Period. That's it. It locked in at a set dollar amount going forward. And then under Governor Cuomo, when the property tax cap came into place, he realized, well, that increase is bigger than your allowable tax cap growth, so we have to cap your growth to 0%. It won't increase above this point at all going forward. So that saves hundreds of millions of dollars annually for the counties in the budget, and it builds every year because we would have been going up every year. So we're at a point now where in this budget, the state's picked up about $5 billion in what would have been local costs going all the way back to the first Medicaid cap. So it's hugely important for local taxpayers and county budgets.
And I just want to emphasize that last point. Yes, the state is picking up $5 billion, $5.5 billion in Medicaid growth costs for counties, but we don't have control over what that program looks like, right? And eligibility for the Medicaid program is set by the state of New York. We don't really have a whole lot of oversight on the Medicaid program as far as waste, fraud, and abuse goes. So it's a very important program. We're very pleased that the state continues that growth. We don't have control over it, so frankly, it should be on them to cap it. So we're appreciative of that. I want to talk a little bit more about some of the other policy areas, getting away from our top priorities, but getting into some details in your various departments at the county level. There is a program that Governor Hochul has proposed. It's called Connect All. And you can think of this as a new wave of investment for broadband and cellular. This is a huge initiative that she's proposed. She's looking at about $1 billion in both public and private investment to expand broadband to rural and urban areas that are either underserved or not served at all by service coverage. This is a proposal that NYSAC has been pushing for many years now. We're so happy to see this included, but perhaps in tandem, one item within the Connect All program that's just as important is the adjustment to the DOT right-of-way fee that's assessed on broadband providers. Right now, if you have a company that wants to go in and build fiber down the road, they have to pay a pretty onerous fee to the state of New York to do that, to work in their right-of-way off the shoulder of the roadway. Within the governor's budget, she amends that provision to waive that fee for projects that come under this Connect All program. That's good news for counties. It should help get broadband out there. Pat, I know you have talked to county officials both in Western and Adirondack Intercounty about this issue for many years.
Yep. No.
This is something that's been supported by those groups as well.
It's a huge issue, and obviously, COVID highlighted a lot of different things of what needs to be a priority, and it was never more clear, especially in our areas such as the Adirondacks and Western counties when we're trying to perform government services, and their residents and even some of our legislatures, they did not have the best access to broadband, and they needed it, and so this is a correction that is happening, and we're going to get federal support, state support, and this is the time. And I think the importance was shown, and we're going to keep following through with this, and I think this is the year for it.
Yeah, it absolutely is. I want to talk for a minute here on environmental priorities and the county perspective as to what's included in the governor's budget. There's really 4 areas that we are supportive of here as the global county community. The governor is proposing an increase of $1 billion to the Environmental Bond Act. That's going to be on the ballot for voters to consider next year in November. Actually, this year in November. If approved by the voters, and if this $1 billion is added to the Bond Act proposal, that should help direct more resources to counties to help with climate resiliency, mitigating future environmental and natural disaster issues, making investments in green technology. So keep an eye on that. We'll have to see what happens within the budget, but also at the ballot box in November. There's a couple other areas here. The governor is proposing to extend producer responsibility for packaging and paper products, and reducing toxins like PFAS in packaging by 2024. So those are areas that NYSAC has been engaged on. Our committees at NYSAC have passed resolutions on those issues. Those are included in the governor's budget. On general government operations, there's a couple areas here that I wanted to highlight. There is an inclusion of $44 million in brand new funding to strengthen the state and local cyber response efforts. It's yet to be determined how that money is going to flow to counties, but there should be some resources there to help counties respond to cyber attacks, strengthen your cyber infrastructure on the back end. And then there's a great proposal in the governor's budget, something that NYSAC and our counties have asked for, which would allow flexibility in the countywide shared services initiative program to allow projects previously proposed but not implemented eligible for state matching grants in the following year. So if you think about this, it takes many years sometimes to implement some of these shared service initiatives. They may have been proposed in prior plans, but it may take several years to get them implemented.
Especially the bigger ones, right?
Especially the large ones.
Yeah.
So what this proposal does is it just says, for those projects that you spent a lot of time working on to try and implement, you're now going to be eligible to receive matching grants. It's a good positive development for counties. It's something that we'll push the legislature to include with the governor in the enacted budget. I want to pivot to some developments in the gaming sphere, and I'm going to go to Pat Cummings on this. He works on gaming issues. There's a couple things, Pat. There was a recent announcement by the state of New York with the Seneca Indian Nation, but then there's also a budget provision that we asked for last year, which has been included again and increased, which is beneficial to several counties. And that's $10 million appropriation.
Yeah.
So why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about what's going on here?
So the good news are 16 counties that get funding through the Seneca Nation for services through slot machines that are played there. That has, and I don't need to tell our 16 counties there, they know this well. That was being delayed for 4 years, those payments, due to a disagreement by the state and the Seneca Nation on contract language between the two, between the nation and the state. That has been settled just a couple of weeks ago now. They announced a settlement, and so the retro pay for those 4 years to those host counties, host cities, towns, that money will start flowing, the full back pay, as well as future payment going forward. That's included, that the money is reflected in this budget, that will start coming shortly to the counties. And that's millions and millions of dollars you're going to be seeing to some of those 16 counties. So that's great news. The other item that Ryan mentioned is the private casinos. The 4 private casinos were eligible by law to act for a tax reduction, and so that actually lowered some of the rates that our counties in the private casino regions were receiving. The state has increased up to $3 million. They paid $7 million last year. Now they're looking to pay $10 million to those local governments that are impacted by the lower tax level that the state got. So hopefully, our counties that depend on services from the gaming money from those areas are going to get an increase there. So that was nice to see, a $3 million increase. There's one other issue that happened in the budget that's of note for gaming, and that's the ability for three more private casino licenses. That could happen anywhere in the state, arguably, but it's really the spots that it's most likely going to happen are downstate region, Long Island, New York City. By law, this could already occur next year. This would just fast forward this ability by 1 year for this to happen. We're going to monitor this. We're going to watch this clearly. If our downstate counties want this, we're going to be supportive of that process. On the other side, we want to be aware of certainly the casinos in upstate and how this is going to impact gaming revenue across the state. And if there's an offset to those counties and communities that New York City traffic is flowing up to, we're going to need the state to help and step in and support for those losses in those communities.
That's a good point, Pat. Thank you for that on gaming. Dave, I want to talk a little bit about higher education and community college investments. I think we've all experienced some really wide swings in enrollment over the last several years, mostly due to the COVID-19 pandemic. What is the governor proposing in her budget for county community colleges?
Yeah, but it's been a big issue for a while now. We've seen declining enrollment in community colleges going back almost a decade or longer. That's not unusual when the economy is doing well. So after the Great Recession, the economy built back up. Additional training for the workforce. People could get jobs and they got them. They don't always think about, boosting their job skills or doing that. So community colleges, you could see a decline. The problem is the funding we get from the state is based on enrollment quite a bit, where they link it to an individual student, knowing full well that there's a lot of overhead from a community college. Once you build the buildings, they have to be staffed, they have to work, you have to have teachers. You don't hire less teachers if you have 5 less students in a class. You still have the same number of teachers. So that all has to be paid, and when the funding is linked to the student census and it's declining over time, when we all know the cost of maintaining everything is going up, it creates deficits. And those deficits, in short, get picked up by the student and then the county, because the county is responsible for paying 1/3 of the cost at a minimum.
That's right.
It's been higher. So the budget creates a floor. So you're not going to get any less money than you got last year for each campus, which is a huge bonus because it lessens your deficit situation right out of the gate.
Yes.
We still need more resources. The state has kind of fallen down on its commitment over the years.
Yeah.
They were supposed to put in a certain dollar amount, a certain percentage of overall cost. And most of that additional cost, because of that shortfall, is falling on the student and the county to make up the difference. So this is a positive development. Some of the other issues is the child care on different campuses, building it in so it makes it easier for students to get to campuses. And there's also the tuition benefit that they're providing for people under a certain income, that you can go to college or university for free, basically for tuition. So,
and that's now going to be expanded for part-time students as well.
Yeah, which is a big issue for community colleges, because we have a lot of our students are part-time in the community college because they're working regular jobs and building their skills part-time.
So hopefully all these initiatives will help increase enrollment in community colleges. We still have a lot of work to do on this issue. For example, we have advocated for years that the Fashion Institute of Technology, which is a school down in New York City, it's not really a community college because you can go and get a master's degree there and your bachelor's degree. But counties are paying very high chargeback rates for that facility that should be treated as a regular SUNY or CUNY school, not as a community college. So that's something that we continue to make as a priority in the higher education space. But just to talk briefly, I want to highlight 2 other critical areas for counties: transportation and infrastructure and veterans. Both of these areas have significant investments in this year's budget. On the transportation side, something that we've been advocating for has been an increase in the CHIPS bidding threshold. So what that means is right now, if you have a road project, maybe you're resurfacing a road or you're rehabilitating a road, if it's under $350,000, you can do it in-house with your own workforce. If it's over that, you have to go out and bid for that project. The bidding threshold increase would allow you to go up to $750,000. So that would actually stretch that CHIPS money a little bit further for counties, allowing you to do more projects because it's cheaper for you to use in-house labor than have to farm that out. Something we support, something we hope the legislature will support and continue in the enacted budget as well. There's also an expansion in highway and bridge funding to include a new Pave Our Potholes program. There's about $100 million in there for local governments. We'll see how the state is going to set up what that formula looks like. We don't know yet, but that will come out as long as it's included in the enacted budget. And then there's another $100 million for a new program called Touring Routes. So again, we have to see how that's going to flow, but we're potentially looking at a $200 million increase. I also want to mention that your CHIPS base aid run is remaining the same as last year, and we should note that that's on top of a $150 million increase from the prior year. So that's good news. Extreme weather at $100 million is in this budget. That was an increase last year. That continues. And Bridge and Pave New York funding are also back in this budget. So there's a lot of money coming in on the state side to transportation and infrastructure. All good things for counties.
I just want to add a little something on the transportation side. What we're seeing here too in the financial plan is a huge injection of federal money related to the bipartisan transportation bill that passed Congress last year. They added $1 trillion in spending to that bill. There's $600 million in new spending. A lot of that is coming down to New York. And what it's allowing is the state to pay cash for a lot of these projects. There's a ton of transit money. Any county that's involved that has a transit system, this is more pertains to downstate where they have bus and rail transit that they deal with. The operating aid from the state is increasing by almost 40%. It's a huge increase. Some of that is probably linked to the federal money that came in because there's a lot of transit aid. But even upstate, you've got Capital District Transit Authority. There's a $2 million increase there to extend service out into Montgomery County.
Yes.
That'll be a great benefit for the folks out in Montgomery. But Rochester, Niagara Frontier, Central New York all have transit programs. They're all going to see big increases. And those are huge benefits for the county and people that live in those regions. So some of that federal money is trickling down and it's having a positive impact, and we're seeing it now in this budget.
Yeah, that's a great point, Dave. And on the veteran front, something that we're really excited about, as you may recall, this past fall, NYSAC launched a new initiative. It was called Operation Greenlight. And Operation Greenlight was more than just changing a light bulb to green to highlight the service of our veterans. Operation Greenlight really was the kickoff to a campaign to advocate for increasing aid, increasing services, and directing an infusion of resources back to the local level so we can connect veterans to the benefits the federal benefits that they're entitled to under federal law, and help support, retain, and attract new veterans to our counties. We have some huge bases, very large veteran populations in upstate New York, particularly Jefferson County always comes to mind. We should be looking at ways, how do we keep those people in our state? And the governor has listened to NYSAC, has listened to the counties, and has directed a significant increase in County Veteran Service Agency aid, increasing that base aid from $10,000 to $25,000. And she has included another $8 million to expand the Joseph PDwyer program statewide. So every county in the state of New York will receive at least $100,000 for the Joseph PDwyer program. It's a huge win for counties, and we just wanted to highlight that. So, in just to summarize everything that we've talked about today for our county officials, there's a lot of information that we've shared. There's a lot more that you can read about and understand. We have 2 documents that are on NYSAC's website. It's the Executive Budget Impact Report and our Executive Budget Scorecard. The scorecard is a 2-page document. It really shows you the good things, the bad things, and everything else in between. Our impact report goes into a little bit more detail. If you have a question about something that we have on the scorecard and you're trying to figure out, well, what does that really mean? The impact report fleshes that out a little bit. It also includes references to the 15 budget bills and memos that are published annually by the Division of Budget and submitted to the legislature for consideration. So if you want to go a little farther, you can go straight to that link as well and get that information. So again, thank you for listening to today's Budget Impact County Perspective report. We look forward to seeing you again soon. And of course, your team, both Dave, myself, Pat, and everyone else at NYSAC, we're always accessible should you have any other questions. Thanks again.